8 weeks or 12 weeks. And so the idea is that any model during that time that you take from primed to finished painting, you get points for. And the larger the model, the more points you get. I always did terrible when I participated in those, because in the 8 to 12 weeks that the league would run, I wouldn't finish very many models. So it's all about your goals. Some people were painting to get a finished army. I had different goals. All right, this is not in the picture, but I feel like this tattoo, this phoenix, needs some longer tail feathers coming out the bottom. So I'm just gonna improvise here and hope it doesn't go bad. Oh. So we're all okay? I don't know what you missed. I don't know how long it was off for. That's a bummer, Cass. I'm sorry that you'll miss the stream, but I did learn how to archive them, so you should be able to go back and watch it later. Maybe that's what Heath just posted, is a link to my YouTube. I don't know. I've been uploading them to YouTube when I get a chance afterwards too. So Cass, can you see my stream, or are you just on chat? Okay, so remember on one of Josh's streams, you said you almost drank your paint water, and I was suggesting what you can do to avoid that. So if you'll notice, I have to reach across my body to get to my paint water, and it's not a very natural motion to set your drink in a place. You know, if you think about setting a table, you set it, right where your dominant hand is. So it's not a natural movement to reach across my body. I also use a red Solo cup for my paint water, whereas my drink glass is here off to the side, and it's always in like a real glass. That helps me to avoid drinking my paint water, and probably even more importantly, putting my brush into my drinking water, which happens more often than me trying to drink my paint water. So that's the system I've developed so that I don't drink my paint water. So you might try that if you find that it's a problem for you. That's good. I think most of the people that I've seen, they'll post pictures and be like, well, look what I just did, and they'll show their paintbrush in their coffee mug or something like that. There are people that use things like coffee mugs to hold their paint water in, and so it's easy to mistake between their drinking glass and their paint water glass. right, so I don't know how well you can see this, but there's the phoenix that I just freehanded on her shoulder. Kind of a stylized phoenix. Now the question for you guys, I'm going to let you guys on stream decide. Is this the only tattoo she has on her left side of her body, or does she have tattoos that go further down her arm too? What do you think? And follow-up question, do we want some on the right arm? Fair enough. Are we in agreement, Cass? Just one tattoo on her? All right. Cool. We shall save all the other neat line art stuff for future projects. All right, so now here's where we get into the next step of the flesh tones. I know, I understand, Heath. I almost made a joke about it, but like I said, I'm not offended. There's definitely something to doing details, but keeping your detail work small scale. Accentuate those details you did put on. All right. So I need to go back to something similar to a basic flesh tone. Yeah, so I think right before you came on stream, Heath, I was showing some of the stuff. I just went through, like I just basically searched, you know, like line art dragons, line art tattoos, and I just basically created a giant set of stuff. That would be really ambitious. Maybe a banner or something. I might try that guy on. But, you know, I just created this. That's just a small bit of it. I got another probably 40 pages of it. And so when I need something for inspiration, I just flip through the folder and pull something out and then try to execute it. All right, so I'm going to mix up something that's similar to her to what I started with on her flesh. Yeah. I'm sure you saw the Etten I painted. He had a mixture of like dragons and tribal stuff on him. And I do have a whole bunch of just examples of tribal art too. I'll grab this guy too. Cass mentioned picking him out of the crowd when I was posting the pictures. This guy's a fire dancer for the Showgirls squad. So those are flames that he's whipping all around himself. And I'm going to do, at least this is my plan. It's a pretty small surface for his name. His last name is Vasquez, so it's a 7-letter last name. I was thinking about doing the tattoo that you sometimes see like kind of in almost graffiti looking letters. but having it across his upper back. But 7 letters in kind of a stylized Gothic type font, it's going to be a tight fit across his back. So I don't know if I'll end up doing that, but that was my plan with him. And he might have some tribal stuff down one of his shoulders or something like that. But so he'll definitely have some tattoos. And I'm thinking with her, so this is another one of the performers. And I'm trying to do some diversity among them for a couple of reasons. First of all, I just think it's good to have that kind of representation. But Malifaux especially is a really good about that. They brought a lot of cultures into the game and that influence the models and the squads in there. And I'm thinking about doing her almost in like a Day of the Dead theme. She's got like roses in her hair, like kind of framing her face. It'd be an opportunity to do like a candy skull paint job on her face, and then some really cool detail work and some textures and things on her dress. But she kind of, like her shoes and everything, she just sort of seems like she fits that aesthetic. So I'm thinking about doing that for her. We'll see. All right, where was I? Oh, how to use that. So again, I'm mixing up something that's similar to where I started. I used basic flesh, a touch of golden flesh, and a touch of light skin. This is going to get pretty watered down again. Do what you gotta do, man. Okay. I'm going to do with this, I am going to just paint over everything I've already painted over, or I have everything I've already painted. But the paint's pretty thin, and this is darker than my highlights, so I'm going to do my brush strokes toward the shadows. So it's going to leave more paint in the shadows than it is in the raised areas. You'll notice I'm painting right over the tattoo as well. As I mentioned earlier, we want that tattoo to sink back into her skin. So we want it to look like it's subcutaneous. And to do that, we have to go over it with some flesh tone so it doesn't look like it's body paint on her. Now, some people will use flesh washes. Games Workshop makes some, Privateer Press makes some. So after they paint up their highlight layers, they start using flesh wash. And washes are kind of similar to what I'm doing here. You know, they're very thin. But the idea behind a wash is that it's you kind of glob a lot of it on, and it doesn't have all the same medium and binders and all this stuff in it that a paint will have. So it's much thinner. You kind of glob it all on. It pools in the recesses of the model. It does stain or color the top layers, but the idea behind it is that it pools in your shadows, and it creates a natural difference between your shadows and your highlights. And that's kind of what I'm doing, but I am putting less on than I would if this was a true wash. This is more like a glaze. So I'm controlling the paint flow a lot more. Less on my brush, more control. And I'm using watered down paint rather than an ink or a wash. Ultimately, what I'm wanting this to do is over several passes, it's going to help not just color her skin so that she looks like a human and not a sickly, pale creature of the night. It's also going to just tie together all of those highlight layers we did and basically make a seamless transition between them. And you'll see that the paint I'm using now is it's hard to simulate exactly human flesh, but it's not washed out like the other paint is. It's got a little bit more tone to it. I might, now that I'm thinking about it, might add a little bit of pink flesh in here too. Give it just a little bit more life. Looks a little better in person than it does on the camera, but you should be starting to see that the skin is getting a little bit more realistic looking. Yet you can still see, like on her legs, you can still see the transitions from the shadows up to the highlights, but she doesn't look like some weird person who's lived underground her whole life. Welcome back. So now, as I do this a couple more passes, I'm going to start to focus on the mid-range colors. So not go all the way up to where my highlights are, but paint towards my shadows, starting in the midtones. Again, we're smoothing out the transitions. You didn't see that. MC Frontalot. I don't know what that is. If you go back, I wish I could kind of, do a comparison, but can you see how her tattoo looks a little bit more like melded with the skin? And it's not so stark like it was when I first painted it on. So that's how you get some decently realistic tattoos. You gotta glaze over them with your skin tones. All right, I'm gonna go one more pass with this. Thanks, Cass. I realize I actually forgot to do something I was planning on doing. When I did the tattoos, I was also going to put some freckling, like some moles and some spots on her arms. Make her skin look more natural. That's again something you kind of want to do before you do this glazing layer, because it'll help them sink below the skin. If you do it now, it could end up looking a little unnatural. Thanks, Heath. Yeah, most people's tattoos don't look freshly applied. And even trying to mimic a freshly applied tattoo sort of is a tough thing. Raps about nerdy culture stuff. I'll have to check him out. What do you think? Should we put a few blemishes? A few like me, I'm covered in these things. Should we put a couple blemishes on her? Man, I wish that you'll have to trust me that in person, she doesn't look quite as washed out as she does on that feed. All right. So the trick will be now. I don't have to be as careful if I'm going to glaze over them all. So I will need to pick just the right color. So my moles are a little bit. Yeah, I can adjust that. The question is just how much do I want to keep jumping back and forth between my computer, because it's hard to reach while I'm sitting here, so I would be jumping back and forth. But I'll take some pictures of her when we're done with the session, and hopefully those will come out better. I'll post those on Twitter. That's a little too dark. I almost wonder if this sort of reddish orange or a brownish orange might look decent. You know, the most common question that I get, usually from people who aren't in the hobby, but they see the things I paint, they ask me, how large is my brush? And before I can even answer, they say, is it one bristle? Which I always find humorous. Because if you remember, or if you were listening to my previous cast, the one I did on my stream, the one I did on Sunday, I was talking about how brushes work. You know, the brush needs a well. The natural bristles especially will have a wicking property, that they wick the moisture up. And then when all the bristles are together, they form like a little pocket in the middle of them, which holds your paint and then can flow off the brush. I actually did, when I was an early painter, I was like, what would happen if I did go down to one bristle? So I took a brush that was failing me a little bit, and I plucked off all of the bristles, or cut off all the bristles except for one. And I stuck it in the paint, and I saw what would happen. And what happened was, the paint went up the bristle just like it would, like it wicked up the length of the bristle, and then the bead of paint just sat in the middle of the single strand of hair. And of course, to then actually go to paint with it, it just sat there in the middle and just dried almost immediately, and it was completely worthless. So you cannot actually paint with a paintbrush that has one bristle. I have learned that firsthand. I feel like I still want a little more red in this. But still, that's the question I get all the time. Do I paint with a single bristle brush? The other question I get all the time is, it's a little bit less now, but it was, yeah, exactly. I got impatient. I'm like, throw it all in. I get asked all the time where I get these holders from. And so for a long time, it was kind of a running joke between my wife and I. So I would finish some model or I would be painting and I'd be really proud of something and I take a picture and I post it on my Facebook page or my Twitter account. And I just like, I'm eager to see what other people think and feedback. And then you get that first notification, you go to the page and it's like, hey, where'd you get that holder? Like no comment on the miniature at all. And it was funny. So I'm trying to keep most of these pretty subtle. Let a couple of them be a little bigger. Some miniature artists will actually do what people on, like, have you ever seen that show Face Off on the Sci-Fi Channel? So when they're working on human models and they're doing a full like face paint to create some kind of alien creature or even just human or whatever, they put down the foundation paint and then they take a paintbrush, they put on various other colors of paint and they just like flick it or like, pull back the bristles like a toothbrush or something and it just sprays all over the model in completely random ways, which ends up looking very natural. And then they kind of, paint over it to help them sink back into the skin. So they'll actually do that, and I'm trying to kind of be as random as I can. I might do one more pass with little bit darker version of this, just to create a little variation in the skin blemishes. Now this can go terribly wrong if your color isn't quite right. You want to keep it fairly close to your skin color. So I might not actually make a second pass. I might just let whatever I get here be fine. You don't want it to look like she has chicken pox or some kind of disease where you would get sores all over your body or something. So I'm not even sure if that shows up on the camera, but hopefully when I take the picture later, you can see a little bit of imperfections on her skin. She's got one kind of mole underneath her eye. Looks pretty cool. All right. Yeah, I think brushes do kind of work like a fountain pen. You put that little pressure and then the paint just releases. So, I'm sure as you work with a fountain pen or, quill pen type things, it takes a lot of practice to get good at putting just the right amount of pressure so you get the right amount of ink out of them. At the right time. All right. Getting near the end of the stream, but I'm going to start doing some shading on the skin. I'm going to take that color we were using and I'm going to add in Indian shadow, just a little bit of Indian shadow. And I'm doing this one separate, kind of like what you saw me do on the orange. And yes, Heath, I might end up putting it all in, but we'll see. I want to add it slowly because I don't want to go too drastic. I just want it to be a little more red and a little darker than what it was before. This is where it would be good if I remembered where on my paper towel I rubbed the previous color on. Okay, that'll probably be good. All right, so once again, this is a shade color. So I'm going to be making sure that my brush strokes head into the shadows. And they're going to start in that mid-tone area. What I did there, I didn't actually wipe the paint off. I got my brush a little wet and just kind of went over what I did and pushed it towards the shadows. This helps to keep that blend edge from becoming a hard color transition, which you can sometimes get when you start to doing the shading because you're using a darker color than what you had before, and so it wants to completely cover up the lighter color. But I don't want that. I want it to be a smooth transition. You can also kind of do it in reverse. You can just paint water on your miniature in the area you're going to work, and then get the paint and go on top of the water and then just do the same kind of motion. And having the wet, it's called wet blending, or it's one type of wet blending. I don't have to worry about it quite as much right here on the arms, because as the shape of the arm, having the harsher, because they curve, having the harsher transition is a little less noticeable and actually a little bit more natural too than when you have like a nice smoothly rounded surface like her leg, where there's a more subtle shift. That's good to hear, Cass. I know a lot of us were worried about you with how stressed you were getting with everything. So glad things are going better. And I bet the snow day helped a little bit too. You move back in the dorm and you have that extra day to get yourself settled and get back in the mindset. But glad to hear you're doing better. You know, that's one of the things I like about, you know, having found you guys through Josh and starting to stream too and getting to know you people. And it's nice to have a small community of people who share your interests and who get together and support one another. It's kind of, I mean, life can be lonely, but this can be a lonely hobby. It's nice to meet people and feel like you've got support out there. Whenever I'm working on a Minnie's face, yeah, we never had a snow day either, Heath, but, you know, I went to ASU, so here in Arizona, I'm not sure we could have ever. I wish we had heat days. There were times when it felt dangerous to go to class just because of how hot it was, but yeah, we never had snow days. Anyway, what I was saying, when I That's awesome, Cass. I'm trying to look at that picture that I don't know who that actually is. Reminds me of Mark Schlereth, the former football player who does stuff with like ESPN and things now. You can't tell who that is. Anyway, I keep starting to say something about painting minis like this. They always look so fake to me until I paint the eyes. Yeah, I know. Like I said though, I tell you what, yeah, it's bad to be out in the snow and it's dangerous and it's cold, but when the temperatures hit 115 and 120, and it's dangerous in a whole different way. But there's something about painting the eyes on a model that just starts to make it come alive, and I can't wait when I start a model. I can't wait till I can get to that step when I get to paint the eyes. As infuriating as it is sometimes to get them to look perfect, they just change everything about the model. Yeah, badly painted eyes do make it come alive in a completely different way. I will show you one of these days on the stream. I'll show you some tricks with eyes. A good starting place to get believable looking eyes without wanting to throw the mini across the room. It won't be with this model because I've already gotten to a point where I can't use the technique I would show you, but I'll show it on another model. I could probably show it on one of the Showgirls models. So maybe I'll just do that real quick one day. I'll have to check that out. I'm always looking for things to put on while I paint. And one of my favorite things is the DVD commentaries. Like if you have old DVDs or Blu-rays, they have director's commentaries or special features, things like that. Those are great because, especially if it's a movie I'm pretty familiar with, I don't really need to watch the movie. I know what's happening. So I can just paint and just listen to people talk about the movie. All right, so I'm just about to the end of this color. I need to, I like podcasts when I drive too. One of the things I'm a big fan of the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and those shows, and they had a podcast with the director and writers and all of those people for pretty much every episode of those shows. And I basically downloaded all of them. And I was going through all of those for a long time. They were a good listen. All right. So I'm pretty much to the point where I need to go a little darker with this and keep doing shading. If you kind of think about where we started tonight with very unnatural looking skin, again, I'll show pictures on Twitter that'll look a little bit better than what she looks. This is really picking up the brightest highlights. But you can see we're starting to get toned into the skin so she doesn't look like a really creepy ghoul. We're starting to define more of the shadows, getting some color into those shadows, and the transitions between the different layers is getting all smoothed out by glazing over the areas. And the tattoo looks nice and embedded into her skin. So I'm gonna stop the stream here in a second, just so that my wife doesn't feel like has to be banished to the other room. And I might keep working on this. I know that I wanted to show all of this on stream, but I need to keep working with the color I'm working, because I just want to keep working off of this and adding a little bit more of the Indian shadow. But once I get to the point where I'm done working with that color, I'll stop, I'll take a picture of it. But then we'll pick up from there the next time I'm working on her. Have you ever listened to Sneak Attack? I haven't actually. I watched quite a bit of Josh's stream and connected with him before I even knew who he was. So I'll have to give that a try, but I have not yet listened to Sneak Attack. Don't throw things at me. All right, so thanks for joining in, guys. And I'll see you around. Have a good night. Take care.